Thank you so much for watching The Fandom. I'm joined here by director Ash Kreis and co-director, editor Eric Risher. Thank you guys so much for being here and for sharing the film with us. I want to start with sort of a simple, broad question, which is, when did the furry fandom become something that you were interested in, just as a topic in general? When did that first interest happen for you both?
So for me, I kind of got interested in the fandom proper probably around 2006. Now, I hadn't thought about making a film about it back then, of course, but I'd always had an interest in anthropomorphic animals and animation and art, and so it just kind of was a natural progression for me when I found it. And then it was later on in life, when I started to fall into my career and work in film, that I actually initially started thinking about trying to do a project on the fandom, but I just never got around until now. So, yeah.
And Eric, how did you get attached to this project?
It's interesting for me because film and furry have always been kind of like tied in my life. I actually was going to film school in my freshman year is when I discovered the fandom, just by like online chat groups and communities, and I started kind of like falling into it myself. So for me, I was always just as invested in this community, and I was kind of learning about myself and growing as a person in the fandom, while also learning and growing as a filmmaker in college. So I've been kind of using my knowledge from film to make a bunch of shorts about the fandom throughout my time in this community. But then after meeting Ash, we decided that we haven't seen anyone explore the history of this community and how it all got started. And it was just kind of a natural progression from there. So that's how it kind of happened.
I think that's what my next question would be, is how did you both connect in order to get something like this made? Does it start with your interest in the furry fandom, or does it start with your interest in film? How did your relationship come together to get this thing started?
Oh my God, this is a crazy story, actually. It's really wild because we met by pure happenstance and chance. Eric hit me up online because he was actually looking to do a different documentary project, one focused on the trans community. I'm transgender, so it's just like kind of a part of my life. And he had reached out to me on social media and was like, "Hey, would you be interested in doing this interview?" And I also noticed that he happened to be furry, and I was like, yeah, let's meet up, get coffee, and talk. And I don't think at the time he knew that I came from a film background prior to transition, and we just we hit it off like that, and we just started talking, and it kind of blossomed into this working partnership that we had. Yeah, and do you want to kind of add to that a little bit, Eric?
No, I think you hit on it pretty well. I mean, I was kind of in town on a different job and kind of discovered that you were in the same city. And I was like, hey, this might be a really great networking opportunity. But then we found that we had so much more in common beyond the scope of that. It became like a friendship really quickly. And then suddenly we were like talking about, wow, what can we do if we put our heads together? And it was kind of this perfect marriage of skill sets, because I come from like a very strong like theory and editorial background. You have a very strong kind of practical and shooting background. So our skill sets were complementary too. So it was just kind of perfect in many ways. And we both had this love for the community that we were a part of, and that had really impacted our own lives and growth as people. So it was like a way to kind of give back in a sense. And I think it was just something that we were just very eager to jump into.
Did you guys know it was going to be a feature documentary when you started? When you started just the exploration, was it set out to be, well, this is going to be a feature documentary, it's going to play film festivals? What was the start of when you started cracking the camera and getting back footage? What were you thinking?
Well, so this project, the Fandom proper, was always going to be a feature film. We had done a web series first, though, so that kind of spawned this whole second project. And after we completed the web series, we were trying to figure out, what questions haven't really been answered, because there have been other films about the community, and there have been other discussions about the community. But there hasn't been anything that's really covered its history, and its history is very rich and unique. I mean, people don't really realize this, people think furries, the internet, but furry kind of comes from the 70s, it's a long time. It's been around for a long time. And the kind of history that's there is just, like completely untouched. And so we just looked at it as an opportunity to kind of explore kind of a unique facet of early nerd culture and like animation culture and like, like science, like science fiction fandom culture, that kind of thing. It was just amazing. Yeah.
What makes the furry fandom so unique compared to a lot of those other fandom cultures, like, talk about sort of sci-fi culture and those kind of things? What separates this one? What makes it so unique? And what, it's such a buzzworthy, we say furries. I think there's so much buzz. I mean, when I told people about this documentary, they were like, oh, wow. They immediately, it's a buzzy phrase. What other than that, what really separates the fandom that you guys have explored versus the ones that, the other topics that sort of came up when you were doing your exploration?
Well, did you want to start, Eric?
Oh, well, I mean, I would say, like, for me, one of the key things that really separates the fandom from other communities is that there's not really a source material that everything is based around. So if I walk into like I don't know, a comic book convention or a superhero convention, you're probably dressed up as characters that we've all seen and known before. And if I don't recognize that costume, it's because I don't know that reference. And if you walk into a furry convention and you see a character that you don't recognize, it's because you haven't met that person yet. And it's not a projection of a character that they love and respect out in the world. It's something that they've created themselves and then have kind of reflected that through this costume or through this dress or through this artwork. And the interactions that you have then become about learning about who that person is on a fundamental level. It's like a permission slip to ask about who you are in a way, because for many people, their characters are projections of like the aspects of their own selves that they find to be of value or important to them, things that they want to, explore or show to other people. And so it's kind of like this opening the door in terms of like connection. And I don't think you kind of get that kind of interaction with other fandoms or communities. So for me, that's one of the things that makes it really special and unique. And it's certainly helped people like me kind of come out of my shell and meet new people and feel like I can express myself. So that really drew me to it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ash.
Oh, I was going to say what I might add to that is it's intrinsically tied to identity, right? So a lot of folks end up finding themselves through the process because you're forced to kind of look inwardly at your own traits and everything else that's kind of going on. And like for me, as a trans woman, it actually helped me open up and come out of my shell. And find myself, like it's funny, like like putting on like a mask or, like a fursuit and like walking around can actually be an incredibly liberating experience because you're stripping away the facade and just getting to be yourself.
Yeah. I mentioned that, that furries gets kind of it has a buzzy phrase out there in the world, but I think that, before I saw this film, and I guess after I watched it, I had to stop and sort of think about, well, what did I think about furries before I saw this film? What was I going into the film with already like kind of lodged in my brain? What did I already started to, what qualities or decisions had I already made about furries before seeing the film? And I was fascinated by a community that I didn't fully understand. And I think there are a lot of strong feelings about the community, both positive and negative, from people who don't fully understand. So what are you hoping that your film either does for the community or helps people like me who don't know enough about the community after seeing it? What are you hoping that we take away from the film?
Well, I would say, I mean, there's always a lot of misconceptions when it comes to any group. You're gonna always deal with like, just like a lot of different viewpoints, and it's hard to kind of look past those usually to see what it's actually about. Furry caught a bad rep early on. We had a lot of bad media, a lot of bad press, especially around the years, like around the 2000s, we had a lot of rough press. But if you can kind of, like look past that and see the community as it is, as it exists, how the people interact in it, and see the degree of fulfillment it adds to their lives, it's amazing. It's life-changing.
Yeah, I think I don't want to speak for Ash, but for me at least, looking at the media and the way it's portrayed the community over the years, the experiences that I've had and like the amazing opportunities and people that I've met, that's not really what I've seen reflected when I've watched the media. So for us, it was kind of a way to say, hey, let's strip away the sensationalism and actually kind of look at the humanity. And to kind of piggyback on what Ash is saying, we sort of hope that in many ways, people will approach any community with this kind of idea that maybe I have these preconceived notions, but there's probably more to the story because I'm projecting my assumptions onto this community. And if I just take time to listen and hear their stories, then that can build bridges instead of burning them. One of the things that I want to bring forward is like the power of the media and how that can really impact and shape the way that people understand and see others, but also the power of taking the time to listen, and hopefully that it goes towards any community and group, not just furry.
It's interesting. You talk about, this idea of sort of labeling. It's easy for us to label people and put them in boxes and not really understand the individual or really get a sense of the community, which is what this film does. Furries live within the LGBTQIA plus community. So much of that movement has struggled to not be labeled. And yet here we go, and we start labeling it, and we attach letters and we say, this belongs here and this belongs there. So what can people like me and people in the community do to help try to not look at things as in putting them in boxes or labeling them, but really try to get to know the individual? What do you hope that we can do as allies that helps to support communities like the furry fandom?
I mean, I would say the biggest thing is just listen, try and understand. Understand that sometimes things might not make sense the second you look at them. I've certainly run into those, those walls before. Like when I transitioned, that's a big hurdle you have to get over, right? The same thing goes with furry. The same thing goes with kind of each one of these other, other elements and communities. I mean, the queer community at large is, a huge spectrum of, individuals. And, we're all kind of together in that one group that often gets labeled as other, right? I mean, if you can just take the time and look and try to understand, it will do so much more, and it will enrich your life so much more because you get to learn something new and you can meet somebody who's different with a different perspective. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of opportunity to be had with being inclusive. And I think one of the things that we see in the film that becomes complicated for the fandom is when gatekeeping starts to arise. And I think that's something that we can kind of take into just culture at large, is that there's a lot of power in kind of giving people the freedom to just to express their true selves, their authentic selves. And when we start saying like who is allowed to do that, that starts to cause problems. Hopefully we can kind of look at people and listen and see like what they can bring to the table. And I think that's something that I really respect about the furry fandom, because like I was saying earlier, it's about like what you like look into yourself and find to be true and bring out forward, and that's the beginnings of connection in the fandom.
Amazing. Thank you both. Thank you, Ash. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the film. It's an incredible dive into something that I don't think a lot of us really know about. We've heard about, but don't really know about. And thank you for bringing that to us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
And I want to remind people that this film is up for the Colorado People's Choice Award. So one of these films in the Colorado Spotlight is going to win the Audience Award for the best film in the festival. So we encourage you to vote and vote for the fandom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.